Most men over 60 believe one quiet mistake is normal, okay? They assume it's harmless. They assume it's inevitable, okay? They assume it's simply what happens with age. Waking up at night to pee becomes something they accept without questioning. They don't complain much about it. They don't always mention it to anyone. They adjust their lives around it. What's surprising is that this assumption is often the very thing that allows the problem to quietly persist. Because in many cases, the body isn't waking you up because your bladder is full. It's waking you up because something earlier in the day never fully shut off. And when that happens night after night, the interruption starts to feel permanent. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to pay attention to, what may be quietly working against you, and what habits are worth reconsidering. Not miracles, not guarantees, it's just clarity. And before we go any further, I want you to keep 3 questions in the back of your mind as you watch. Why does this happen even on nights when you don't drink much? Why does it sometimes feel worse after days when you did everything right? And why do so many men focus only on the bladder when the signal often starts somewhere else? We'll come back to each of those. First, let's talk about the invisible mistake. After 50, the body becomes more sensitive to timing. Not just what you do, but when you do it. This change doesn't announce itself, doesn't come with pain or sudden symptoms. It shows up as subtle friction. Sleep becomes lighter. Recovery takes longer. Feigned routines that once worked start to feel less reliable. One of the most common patterns I see is men treating the evening as a continuation of the day. Dinner stays late, mental stimulation stays high. Hydration continues right up until bedtime. Screens stay on. The nervous system never fully transitions. Nothing here feels extreme. Nothing feels wrong, but the body keeps score. What many men don't realize is that nighttime urination is often less about urine production and more about sleep disruption. When sleep remains shallow, the brain wakes more easily. And once you're awake, the body looks for a reason. The bladder becomes that reason. This is where many men get stuck. They assume the bladder caused the awakening, when in reality, the awakening came first. That's the first invisible mistake. And this is where the first curiosity loop closes. That night when you barely drank water, but still woke up. The night when you told yourself, that makes no sense. In many cases, it wasn't hydration at all, to a sleep depth. Now, let's slow this down. Deep sleep is protective. It keeps the brain from reacting to minor internal signals. It allows the bladder to stretch and wait. But shallow sleep does the opposite. It turns normal sensations into alarms. And shallow sleep often begins long before bedtime. This brings us to a pattern that surprises many men. The issue often starts earlier in the day. Let me give you a typical example. John is 62. He's responsible. He's consistent. He takes care of himself. He eats dinner around 8 p.m. He drinks water because he's been told hydration is important. He watches the news or scrolls on his phone before bed. He doesn't feel anxious. He doesn't feel stressed. He feels normal. But his nervous system never fully powers down. The brain stays alert. The body stays semi-engaged. Sleep never fully deepens. He wakes at 2 a.m. not because his bladder is screaming, but because his sleep never reached its deeper stages. Once awake, the bladder steps into the spotlight. He goes to the bathroom. He tells himself it's just age, and the pattern continues. Another example. Mark is 67. He avoids drinking water late. He's careful. He's tried all the obvious things, and yet he still wakes up. What he doesn't notice is what's happening earlier in the day. Caffeine that creeps later than he realizes. Long afternoon naps that reduce nighttime sleep pressure. Mental tension that never fully releases. Again, the bladder takes the blame. But it's reacting, not initiating. These are not unusual men. They're not doing anything extreme. They're doing what most men their age do. And that's why the pattern is so common. This leads us directly into a widespread myth. The myth is that frequent nighttime urination is always a prostate problem. The reality is more nuanced. Yes, prostate changes can play a role, and that's something worth discussing with a clinician. But many men with similar prostate findings sleep through the night without interruption. What's different? Often, it's how well the body transitions into true rest. Here's where the second curiosity loop closes. Why does it sometimes feel worse after healthy days? Because activity, hydration, and even good routines can backfire when timing is off. A day full of movement can increase fluid shifts at night. A day full of stimulation can delay nervous system shutdown. Healthy actions aren't wrong, but without timing awareness, they can quietly work against sleep. Now, let's introduce a simple framework. Not a treatment plan, not a diagnosis. It's just a way to understand what's happening. The first part is evening load. This is what your body is still processing when you lie down. Food, fluids, information, stress. If the system is busy, sleep becomes lighter. The second part is nervous system quiet. This is the signal that tells the body it's safe to stay asleep. When that signal is weak, the brain remains on alert. The third part is sleep depth protection. This is about reducing unnecessary awakenings that give the bladder a chance to speak. And the fourth part is signal interpretation. Learning when the bladder is the cause and when it's just the messenger. Notice what's missing. There's no extreme restriction here. No rigid rules. No overnight promises. This framework doesn't ask you to fight your body. It asks you to understand it. Which brings us to another myth. The myth says, just stop drinking water at night. The reality is more complicated. Dehydration can irritate the bladder. It can concentrate urine. It can increase urgency. Many men who cut fluids aggressively find that sleep actually worsens. Again, it's rarely about cutting something completely. It's about spacing, timing, and awareness. Now let's close the final curiosity loop. Why do so many men chase solutions and still wake up? Because they're trying to silence the symptom instead of calming the system. They focus on the bladder. The signal often starts higher up. When sleep becomes deeper, the bladder often becomes quieter without force. This doesn't replace medical care. It doesn't diagnose anything. And it doesn't promise outcomes. It simply helps you notice patterns worth discussing with your clinician. If you're watching this and thinking, this sounds familiar, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not broken. Before you go, leave a single word in the comments that best describes your nights. Tired, interrupted, light, or managing. And if you want to continue, watch the next video on how sleep depth quietly changes after 60 and what may help protect it. Sometimes the biggest improvement doesn't come from doing more. It comes from understanding what to stop ignoring.